In this problem, we want to be able to draw the Lewis dot structures for two related species, so carbon dioxide and carbonate. Let's start with carbon dioxide. The first step in determining a Lewis dot structure is to count the total number of electrons in the atoms that are present in the compound. We count the valence electrons, and so carbon has 4 valence electrons, and oxygen has 6 valence electrons, times 2, so we get 4 plus 12, which is 16 total valence electrons. In the next step, we simply write down all the atoms. The typical rule of thumb is to put the least electronegative element in the center, and we surround it with the other elements that are present in the compound, the more electronegative elements. We will then draw bonds to the central atom. For the remaining electrons, for a total of 16, we start putting them in lone pairs around the other atoms. For example, we know we have a total of 16 electrons here. We have 2 electrons in each of these bonds for a total of 4, and so we need a total of 12 lone pair electrons. And so that's a total of 6 lone pairs, and the rule of thumb in Lewis dot structures is to start with the external atoms and then start filling in the lone pairs on those before moving to the interior atoms. Okay, and so we see that we can have 6 lone pairs by putting 3 on each of these oxygen atoms, and we don't need to place any on the interior carbon atom. Now the next step is to fill the octet of the central atom, carbon, by having some of these lone pairs participate in bonding. We see that we can take this lone pair and have it contribute to a bond, and also have this lone pair contribute to a bond. Right, and so carbon, which in this structure above only had a total of 4 electrons in its octet instead of the 8 it needs to complete its octet. Right, if we donate those 2 lone pairs, then we now have a doubly bonded structure. And each oxygen atom has 2 lone pairs. And we see that this structure completes the octet of all of the atoms as it should. So we have a total of 8 electrons involved in bonding with carbon through 4 bonds, and a total of 8 for each oxygen in the form of 4 that are in bonds and 4 that are in lone pairs. Right, and so our overall CO2 structure should look like this in a linear type structure. We can use the same procedure for carbonate. So again, we begin by counting the total number of electrons in the system. Right, there are 4 valence electrons for carbon, there are 6 for oxygen, and there are 3 oxygen atoms. And then we have an extra 2 that we add because carbonate carries along with it a -2 charge, and that gives us a total of 24 valence electrons. Right, we again surround the central carbon atom, which is the least electronegative, with the 3 oxygen atoms, and we use the same procedure that we initially draw bonds between the carbon and all the oxygen atoms. That gives us a total of 6 bonded electrons out of the 24, and so we have to fill in the remaining 18 electrons in terms of lone pairs. And we see that we accomplish that by putting 3 lone pairs around each oxygen atom. That gives us a total of 18 electrons around those oxygen atoms. Okay, we see that we still need to complete the octet for the carbon atom in carbonate because the carbon atom only has 6 electrons at this point, and that can be accomplished by choosing one of these oxygen atoms to donate its lone pair into that bond. Now the central atom will have its octet completed through the donation of the electron on one of the oxygen atoms to bonding with the carbon atom. We should formally specify this as having a -2 charge. We see that now the carbon has its octet completed through the participation in 4 bonds involving a total of 8 electrons. The oxygen atom to the right has its octet completed through 4 bonding electrons and 4 lone pair electrons. And the other 2 oxygen atoms also have their octets completed. We see that these oxygen atoms actually carry what's called a formal charge with them. And so we have an overall charge of -2 on these oxygen atoms. The oxygen atoms will have a total of 6 valence electrons, we see that those oxygen atoms, we have 6 electrons that are present in lone pairs on each of the oxygen atoms that are to the left of the structure. These oxygen atoms that are to the left of the structure, they have, out of their 6 valence electrons, they have 6 that are present as lone pairs, and then they're sharing this covalent bond with carbon, and so we can assign 1 electron to that oxygen atom. And so that means that it has 7 electrons associated with it, whereas the valence level is normally 6. And so we say that these oxygen atoms have a formal charge of -1. Right? And so this is where a lot of the negative charge of the molecule is residing. And when we draw a structure like this, note that we just sort of arbitrarily selected this oxygen atom to donate the electron density, but in fact any of them could. And so we expect to have resonance structures where we could instead draw the double bond to the top oxygen atom or to the leftmost oxygen atom, and that all of these structures should be equivalent. Okay, and this shows us the Lewis dot structure, gives us an idea of where the electrons are residing. We can see where we achieve formal charges, and again, the general procedure is that we count up the total number of electrons in the system as the first step. We start distributing those electrons first at the more electronegative elements that we generally have on the outside of our structure. Then to complete the octet of the interior atom, we choose some of those electrons, as shown here, right, to participate in bonds that complete that octet. And once that octet is completed, then we can go through and count and make sure that all the electrons, as a final check, and make sure all the electrons are accounted for. And we have our overall structure that shows the distribution of electrons in the system in terms of the bonding electrons versus the lone pair electrons.